Hey, sixth graders, happy Wednesday. It is November 25th. This is our last day of the week, and I promised you a short day, but a poignant, thoughtful day. Tomorrow is Thanksgiving, and then Friday we have off as well, and we'll see you on Mondays. We kick off kind of really the last month before winter break. So things are looking positive on the horizon. So I want you to have a great day and a great rest of your weekend. And remember, if things are getting kind of tough, just hang in there. I got you. We got each other, and we'll get through this. So today is a kind of an important day because it's setting up Thanksgiving, right? In our country, Thanksgiving is kind of a huge deal, and it has a lot of meaning. But I want to make sure that we talk about the whole story. That's about ELA is about telling whole stories, not just part of the story. Perspectives are important so that you see through different people's eyes. So this is National Indigenous Peoples History Month, and Minnesota has a rich history of Native peoples and their stories. It's also got some hard stuff, and I want to make sure that we are always very truthful in our understanding of history. So while this week is really important to think about, like, where we come from and like who is here first and how that relationship exists with us today. For instance, this school is sitting on ground that was ripped from people who were here. They were forcefully moved. Most of Minnesota is that way. If you have to go to the reservations, which was land that was given to tribes, that really technically should have been theirs all along. It wasn't anyone's right to give it to them. It was theirs. So we sort of have an issue of balance in what is right and what is history's real story. So anyway, that's an important thing to remember. And today I am going to focus on a very particular writer. Her name is Louise Erdrich. She is a local writer. This is Birchbark Books, which is also a cafe. This is actually right near my house in South Minneapolis. It's about a mile and a half to 2 miles away. This is the book we're going to be reading today, The Birchbark House, and she is a Native American writer. And she's probably one of our greatest writers in Minnesota history. She has written so many books, and they are incredible. And what she's really doing is telling her story as a Native American, as an indigenous person. And if you don't know the word indigenous, it means basically people who were here first, the people native to the land. And there are indigenous peoples all across the globe, and a lot of them have sort of been forced out by settlers and people who were, who had resources that moved in and kind of took over. And those are histories we have to talk about. So anyway, today, Louise Erdrich, who, again, one of our most prized possessions as a Minnesota state. She is arguably, on the list of one of the top authors in the history of writing. And she is one of ours. She's Minnesota's, and she is a true gift and a treasure. And she tells some hard stories about her experience, and sort of the general experience of Native Americans, and especially Minnesota natives. And that's the part. So here we go. Read a few pages of this one. The girl from Spirit Island. The only person left alive on the island was a baby girl. The tired men who had come there to pick up furs from the Anishinaabe people stood uneasily on the rocky shore. The voyagers watched from a distance as the baby crawled in a circle, whimpering and pitiful. Her tiny dress of good blue wool was embroidered with white beads and ribbons, and her new moccasins were carefully sewn. It was clear she had been loved. It was also clear that the family who had loved her was gone. All the fires in the village were cold. The dead lay sadly in blankets, curled as though sleeping. Smallpox had killed them all. The voyagers trembled at the thought that the disease might have already chosen one of them. Surely, they muttered, the baby had the sickness too. She's sick. She looks tired, said one man when she lay down against one of the blanketed figures. Let her sleep. Birds were singing, dozens of tiny white-throated sparrows. The trilling, rippling sweetness of their songs contrasted strangely with the silent horror below. From first one, then the other of the men turned away. They got back in their canoes. As they paddled toward the next island, all were silent, thoughtful. Some wore hard expressions. One man had tears in his eyes. His name was Hat. He thought of his wife and decided he would tell her about the baby. If there was anyone in the world who'd go and rescue that little girl, it was his wife. He shivered a little as he thought of her. He couldn't help it. Tallow, she was called, and sometimes she scared him with her temper. Other times, he was amazed at her courage. He grimaced in shame. Unlike him, his wife was afraid of nothing. A grimace is like a thought. All right, Neben, summer. Oops, sorry. The Birchbark House. She was named Omakayas, or Little Frog, because her first step was a hop. She grew into a nimble young girl of 7 winters, a thoughtful girl with shining brown eyes and a wide grin, only missing her 2 top front teeth. She touched her upper lip. She still wasn't used to those teeth gone and was impatient for new grown-up teeth to complete her smile. Just like her namesake, Omakayas now stared long at the silky patch of bog before she gathered herself and jumped. One hummock. Safety. Omakayas sprang wide again. This time she landed on the very tip-top of a pointed old stump. She balanced there, looking all around. The lagoon water moved in sparkling crescents. Crescents is like a quarter moon. So I think you guys can figure out this is the baby, grown up. First, her name is Little Small Frog because her first step was a hop. She's clearly in a Native American community here. Thick swales of swamp grass rippled. Mud turtles napped in the sun. The world was so calm that Omakayas could hear herself blink. Only the sweet call of a solitary white-throated sparrow pierced the cool of the woods beyond. All of a sudden, Grandma yelled, "I found it!" Startled, Omakayas slipped and spun her arms and wheels. She teetered, but somehow kept her balance. 2 big skipping hops, another leap, and she was on dry land. She stepped over spongy leaves and moss into the woods where the sparrows sang nesting songs in delicate relays. "Where are you?" Nokomis yelled again. "I found the tree." "I'm coming," Omakayas called back to her grandmother. It was spring. Time to cut the birch bark. Hey, side note, Nokomis, that's the name of the lake that is about a quarter mile from my house. So this name, think about this author, Louise Erdrich. She's coming from our region in South Minneapolis. That lake, Nokomis, is right near my house, so that name is very familiar to me. All winter long, Omakayas' family lived in a cabin of the sweet-scented cedar at the edge of the village of La Pointe, on an island in Lake Superior that her people called Moaning Owanikaning, Island of the Golden-Breasted Woodpecker. I wish I could say that the right way. I'm sure I just butchered the pronunciation of that word. As soon as the earth warmed, the birchbark house always took shape under Nokomis' swift hands. Now the dappled light of tiny new leaves moved on Grandma's beautiful, softly lined face. In one hand, she waved her sharp knife, taken from the beaded pouch on her hip. In the other hand, she held tobacco. Nokomis was ready to make an offering to the spirits, or manitous. They loved tobacco. Omakayas banged the tree her grandmother had found. "Yes, here it is, this one." Omakayas was skinny, wiry, and tough for 7 winters. She slammed the trunk of the birch with a big rotten stick. Splinters of soft wood flew. "Booney!" Nokomis scolded. "Leave it alone!" She walked up to the tree and put her leathery paw-like hands on the smooth bark, feeling for flaws. "Yes," she decided, her eyes sparkling at her granddaughter. "A good one. Is it ready?" "Get," said Nokomis. "Surely." Nokomis's tobacco pouch was decorated with blue and white beads in the shape of a pipe. She had owned this tobacco bag ever since Omakayas could remember. When she talked to the manitous, Nokomis dipped out a pinch of tobacco. "Old sister," she said to the birchbark tree, "we need your skin for our shelter." At the base of the tree, Nokomis left her offering sweet and fragrant. Then she peered closely, deciding just where to make the first cut. Suddenly she pressed her razor-sharp knife into the bark. Omakayas stepped back. Light filtered golden and green under their faces. Tiny white flowers poked out of dead leaves. There were still traces of grainy old snowbanks in the shadiest spots, but in places the sun was actually hot. Pow! As soon as Grandma had made the proper cuts, the birch bark filled with spring water nearly burst from the tree. Omakayas held her grandmother carefully, pushed the bark aside. Then the two peeled it away strip by strip. She and Omakayas carried the light, papery, pink-brown rolls out of the woods down a trail to the special place near the water. Here they set up the Birchbark House. Damp ground made Nokomis's old bones ache, so she spread out her brown cattail mat and sat down there to sew those pieces of bark together. I'll show you that picture. That's her stripping away the bark. It's actually, she called the tree old sister. That's that relationship that Native people have with the world around them, is that they're all connected, right? And if you've ever seen a birch tree, when you peel the bark, you're hurting the tree. You're damaging it. So she's sort of like appealing to it, like, I need this to make my birch bark house. You are sacrificing for me. And that's that balance, that give and take. Understanding that you don't just eat an animal, an animal has sacrificed its life for you, so you need to honor it. Really an interesting concept. This book is going to teach you a lot about the daily life of people who live in a Native American fashion. Omakayas helped her, threading the tough basswood strands through holes punched by Grandma's awl. An awl is like a puncher, almost like a nail. Meanwhile, Mama and Omakayas' older sister tied together a frame of bent willow poles. Finally, as the light faded, they fastened the mats of bark onto the willow frame, a half skeleton of pliable saplings. Pliable is bendable. The bark mats overlapped like shingles, like the ones on your roof, to shed the rain. Each one was secured to the next so as not to blow off in a storm. When the house was swept out, smooth, fussily arranged, and admired, they moved in. The children, Omakayas' brother, Little Pinch, baby Niwo, Omakayas' older sister, Pretty Angeline, and Omakayas herself spread their blankets around the stone fire pit. Mama and Nokomis hung the smoky, woven bags of rice and tools and medicines from the willow poles above. Omakayas' family were Anishinabeg, and this was their island. Her father, her Dede, was in the fur trade business, which meant that he was often gone paddling the great canoes for the fur company or sometimes trapping animals himself. Yellow Kettle, her mother, was quick-tempered but always laughing, and her eyes shrewdly took in the world. I mean, she's sort of wary of it. Kettle was a strong-looking woman and beautiful. Her smile was generous, enigmatic. Enigmatic means like unsure, or sort of like, what do you mean by that smile? Slightly crooked and kind. She missed nothing when it came to her children. It was impossible to hide a half-done job. Ridiculous even to think of sneaking away in the morning before gathering wood for the fire and water for her cooking pot. And if Mama didn't notice the younger children's whereabouts, Omakayas' older sister, Angeline, surely would. So Mama, if you think about what you're describing, this is a family like any others, right? Mama's watching the kids, and they can't get away with anything if they're being irresponsible. Angeline was smart and so pretty, people turned in their tracks to stare at her. Her hair was thick, her hands clever. The beads in her designs were laid down in strict rows. Her stitches never faltered. Her steps when she walked or danced were clear and graceful. She was so perfect that Omakayas despaired. Still, she hoped that she herself would turn out like Angeline, and was sometimes embarrassed to find herself following at Angeline's heels like a puppy. Most of the time, Angeline was kind to Omakayas and let her tag along and admire from a distance. But there were also times her words were sharp as bee stings, and at those times Omakayas shed tears her sister never knew or probably even cared about, for as very beautiful people sometimes are, Angeline could be just a little cold-hearted at times. Omakayas' little brother Pinch was the only really big problem in her life. The sad truth was, and she couldn't tell this to a single person, Omakayas didn't like little Pinch. Any of you not like your siblings? She thought there was something wrong with him. So greedy, so loud, but although his ways were mischievous and bold, Pinch loved his mother deeply, and he clung to her side. In fact, he looked up at all her attention. In fact, he took up all her attention, even more than the baby. He clutched Mama's skirts with fat, tough little fingers. He yelled at Omakayas if she was slow in giving up her willow doll, her little rock people, or anything else for that matter, including food, special pieces of driftwood she found, even her favorite sleeping place near Grandma. He thought he deserved everything. At least when it came to Niwo, there was nothing to complain about. He was so sweet that Omakayas often pretended that he was her very own baby. Of course, she hardly ever got to hold him, for he was still very young, Still, she was sure he preferred her to Angeline, and certainly to Pinch. Sometimes he even held his arms out to her when Mama was holding him, and yelled with delight when Omachias picked him up. Here's a picture of Yellow Kettle, the mother, and that's little Pinch. Okay, so we got a lot of the story of their family, right? We don't know where the story is going. The Birchbark House is kind of looking like that, but we're not sure where this is going. I don't know either, but I want you to consider what they did. What this author did is give you a taste of their life and who this family is. Now we know who they are. Now we care. That's what authors do. Okay, so for today, pretty simple. You read with me. You go to your book, your reader's notebook, right here, and I want you to go to the reading list, and you're going to fill out this information. We're at the Birchbark House, and I have a long question for today. I want you to consider it. So this is Indigenous Peoples Month. Like I said, I want you to really consider, this is a tough question, I want you to do two things. I want you to consider the both and, the opposites. Thanksgiving is really important that we show gratitude and thanks for the things we have, okay? So we are supposed to celebrate the legacy and the history of our Native American community. However, Thanksgiving can be a tough time because the history books tell us that the first Thanksgiving was a peaceful and joyous meal of togetherness between pilgrims and Native peoples already here. Those history books haven't really told the whole truth. For some people who are Native, Thanksgiving is a harsh reminder that their land was stolen from them by settlers in search of land and property. So my question this day is this: what is something you can do today or this week to honor both the wonderful spirit of Thanksgiving, which is to be grateful for the things you have and the people you have, and respect and sort of honor the fact that this day can be really hard for Native peoples because it's a reminder of a dark history where their land was taken from them. How can we be both, right? I know this is a tough question, but I want you to just consider, and then right when you are inspired, what is something you can do to honor both? Give thanks. Thanksgiving is this amazing time of thanks, and honor that it could be hard for some of our Native peoples because it's a real reminder of the things they've lost based on settlers and communities that moved in. So lots to think about, but this is a very thoughtful time. I hope you're all well, hope you're safe, and I'll see you next week.